Hey, nonprofit friends, we're back for another episode of A Modern Nonprofit podcast powered by the Charity CFO. I'm Tasha Anderson, your host, and today we're going to be talking about something a little bit differently, with a different kind of spin on it from a different person. So I brought along my new friend, as you know, every week I have a new friend, Sandra Tor. You are the president and CFO of LAVIDGE, and
Correct.
we today are going to talk about how you help companies set up and sustain a corporate giving program. So this is us figuring out or understanding how companies can set up a corporate giving program so that they could then obviously contribute to nonprofits within our community. You lead the award-winning corporate philanthropy initiative, and we call that Impact. And today we're
Mhm.
going to talk a little bit more about impact and how it works within your business and how it impacts other organizations. So I'm really excited and interested. I've never talked about this before. But before we dive in, I want to say first, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk more about this program and maybe inspire other people to do something similar or encourage other businesses to consider a similar concept.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's dive into Impact. Impact is the name of your corporate giving program. Tell us about it. What is Impact? And just let's start there. What is Impact?
Right. So we're an advertising creative agency in Phoenix.
Mhm,
And I am the CFO, but I'm also the co-president. And so my main focus is finance, right? Financial
mhm,
health, strategic growth, and that sort of thing. But it's also keeping our values and vision at the center of everything we do. And
mhm,
several years ago, our CEO, who's also our founder, sold part of the company to an employee stock ownership plan. So the employees
mhm,
kind of became the owners of the company. And he's also always been a big contributor in our community and, well known for his philanthropy and generosity. But we were kind of thinking, okay, that's wonderful. But
mhm,
what can we do for the employees? We were seeing more and more that employees wanted to work at an organization that has some kind of commitment to the community.
mhm,
And so we kind of set out to create something that's not necessarily monetary, but sort of hands-on giving back. And
mhm,
so that's how we came up with Impact. So being in an advertising agency, we bill our time typically
mhm,
for our
mhm,
work. And so you have employees going, okay, how am I going to stay billable and also participate in this corporate philanthropy? So we created like a almost like a little mini board. We
mhm,
asked people, how often do you want to volunteer? What are the areas that you feel passionate about? And then it
mhm,
just became really obvious we needed to sort of formalize it. And so
mhm,
we created a mission for it, we created a policy for it, and having the policy was really, about giving permission to our
mhm,
employees to
mhm.
participate without feeling like, I mean, again, I'm the CFO. It's okay to take this time and spend it out in the community. So
Okay.
yeah, and that was, I want to say 2018, 19. And so
Mhm,
we typically participate in events during the workday that I coordinate, and we get, I think last year we spent about 400 hours
Wow.
volunteering. And we do also do some monetary contributions, like we participate, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Arizona Gives Day. It's a
Mhm,
statewide, day of giving. So we have
mhm.
our own page for that. So our partners and employees can participate with that. We participate in Giving Tuesday. We
Sure.
have the options for employees to make donations to their favorite charities through payroll and that
Mhm.
sort
I I love that. So talk to me a little bit more about what these types like how does this work within your organization? Do you have individuals you had mentioned like a board and then they express interest and obviously everybody's involved in different things. So do you all do these events together
we all
or
do them together. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And so what happens is now, it's a little bit different than when we started, which was before COVID. And so what it's sort of evolved into is I run it and
Mhm.
I take ideas from everyone. So if you have an
Okay.
idea, if there's a charity that you're interested, something you're working with, you feel
Mhm.
passionate about, you send them my way, I connect with them, I organize the event, I send it out to our employees, and then we all meet up and volunteer for that organization. So the causes are very widespread. There'll
Sure.
be 1 month we're out at the Potbelly Pig Rescue, and
Right.
another month, where a recent one came up that where babies need to be held. They're born
Oh
addicted
yeah.
to narcotics. And
Hmm.
so that has come up. So we were going to participate in that one. There's toy
Hmm.
drive. I mean, there's all sorts of causes. And so this way we have a little bit for everyone. And so
Hmm.
there's kind of no excuse to participate.
Okay.
Not to it.
So you are a numbers person too,
Yeah.
like me. And I always love a numbers person that's a sucker for a good cause. I mean, that's how I ended up here where I'm at. So help me understand, kind of as you all were going back and forth, and you had mentioned that your events are during the time or during the business hours, right? Help me
Yes.
understand the business case or like the calculations or the conversations that went into, yes, we're going to go all in and we're going to do this.
Yeah, well, again, our employees were dying for something, and
Mm,
we were noticing that too in our new hire process and our recruiting
mm,
process. People were asking, "What are you doing to help the community?" And I didn't feel like the employees were doing enough. We didn't have an official program. And so
mhm,
when we came up with it, I felt like it does so many different things. It brings people together and creates better morale. I think it
mhm,
motivates people. I think when you're at work all day and you're on a computer and maybe something's going wrong in your business day, when you get out of that day and you go and volunteer, it sort of puts things in perspective. It keeps us grounded.
mm, mhm,
And it feels like the more um, creative and engaged employees are, the more productive they
mhm,
are at work. So
mhm,
it just kind of
mhm,
really works together. And it just like that compassionate leadership also builds trust. And
mhm.
so it just creates an environment, I think, of giving and caring about the community.
Sure, sure. And do you all have like a certain number of hours that you allot to this, or is it just everybody's invited to every event, or how is that kind of structured for you all? And I don't know how
Yeah,
many
so
employees you have either, so yeah.
we have about 65 employees.
Okay.
I try to do these once a month. Sometimes we do 2 or 3 a month, just depending on what's going on in the community.
Hmm.
Sometimes, but it's usually once a month, once every 6 weeks, and I send it out. And if you're interested, you can participate. If you're not, you don't. It's fine. The policy is that everyone has up to 16 hours per year
Okay.
volunteer during the workday, and we track it just to see who's participating and sort of how popular it is and that sort of thing, so we can kind of tell at the end of the year and we can sort of report on how well
Sure.
we've done.
Okay, that makes sense. So you create opportunities for people to easily, yep, I'll do that. It's kind of, in my face. I can opt into that or not. And then you also give them a certain number of hours.
Mhm.
Within this program, are people allowed to volunteer outside of your company organized events on their own?
They can. I mean, I feel like a lot of people already do that. Everyone
Yeah,
has, like there's a lot of people that do stuff with their church or there's other
yeah,
organizations that they
sure.
work with. And this isn't meant to replace any of that. It's just
Yeah,
meant for us to come together as a
do stuff
team
together.
and,
Gotcha.
and give back. And so there are a lot of people that do stuff outside of it as well. But I really tried. This impact program is specifically for the work day. So we
Sure,
get a lot of ideas like, well, there's something going on Saturday, I always kind of steer away from them because I know our employees work hard all week. They want their
sure.
weekends. I don't want to create a situation where they feel like they're obligated. The idea is that it's a fun way to give back and that we're
Mhm.
making a difference in the lives of the people in our community.
I'm curious too, because and I'm asking a lot of these questions too because we've tried piloting something similar for our team. I think hard to find people that would argue like, oh yes, I don't want to do this, but then getting people to actually show up and participate is a whole other challenge because people are busy or they come in or it's like, look, I need to get home, so I need to focus on work while I'm here, whatever it might be. How has this program been received by your staff and what kind of participation are you all seeing?
I think we have, when we first started it, it was enormous participation,
Mm,
because people had been
sure.
kind of wanting this for a while.
Right.
And then COVID hit and it became, okay, what are we going to do? And to me, I was
Right.
like, we're going to double down. Like we
Sure.
can't do stuff in person, but we're going to find ways to contribute virtually. And we did. We found a lot of organizations that were having virtual events. And
Sure.
so that worked out really well. And over time, I think we've maintained, a good amount. I mean, to contribute anywhere from 300 to 500 hours with 65 people is pretty
Hmm.
decent. We do 12 to 15 events a year, so it's
Hmm.
the participation has been great. But it does depend. I mean, if your work day is such that you're coming up against a deadline and there's no way you
Right.
can get out, you need to work. And so, but I think having them frequently and having lots of different types of opportunities, we kind of, I put them out there 2 or 3 months in advance so people know it's on their calendar so they can
Hmm.
plan around it.
And you said you had 60 something employees. One of the challenges that we've had is getting groups, organizations rather, that can accommodate kind of a larger group. Originally we had this idea we're going to do like company-wide events a couple times a year.
Mhm.
Not a lot of nonprofits can accommodate a 50-person volunteer group, right? So
Right.
how big are your groups? I have all the questions. How big are your groups? How do you find organizations that can support that group?
Yeah, every time I find an organization, they usually will say our limit is 5, 10, 15, whatever it is. And I'll send it out and say we're limited to 5, or there's a minimum of 10 for this one. So people
Mm-hmm.
will just sign up based on what the organization is asking. We
Mm-hmm.
typically have, 10 to 15 per group that
Mm-hmm.
go out. The bigger ones, like the food banks and the
Yeah.
Christmas angels, you obviously get a lot bigger participation, and they have the room for that. But like one of the ones we talked to recently is a small dog rescue, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't have a big space, so they can't have 20 people in there. So they've
Sure.
said,
Right.
okay, we can take 8 to 10. And then, our employees can look at the different events on their calendars and say, well, this one, it looks more fun, or I care about this one, I
Right.
have a passion for this, and then just decide.
Exactly. And then in a more tactical way, how do you organize all of this? Because I'm thinking you told me you were the co-president and CFO and apparently the impact program operator, organizer, volunteer coordinator. That's a lot of logistics. And so I'm curious to hear how you organize all of this, because likely a program like this at any other company is going to be a part of someone's already existing responsibilities. So how do you organize? I guess we'll first start with, how do you get solicitation from your employees about, what organizations do you want to participate in? What do you use,
Yeah.
like Google Forms or some
No,
support?
we're mostly remote. And so
Hmm.
we work a lot on Teams,
Hmm.
and then every month we meet in person, we have staff meetings, and so I introduce the charity, whatever it is, and I say who, what, when, where, and this is what we're going to do. And then I solicit ideas at that time as well. Like, your ideas are welcome. I think the employees that have brought in charities. And so it's just an ongoing style of communication where there's never silence. I mean, it's just there's always something happening. And so we
Hmm.
keep it at the forefront of
I
their
love that.
minds, and hopefully they'll find something that they want to participate in.
And then the signups, you just, what, like
They
sign up Genius or something like that.
They no, they we do it through Outlook. I
Oh,
send it
okay.
out as a calendar invite. They RSVP yes or no, and then I
Okay.
kind of confirm it couple days before,
Sure.
and yeah, and then we all show up.
Good, good. So I'm curious to know, how has this shifted your global company from like pre-impact to pro-impact? How does that show up in your recruiting, in your day-to-day, your retention? Like, what do you think is the biggest changes between pre and post?
Yeah, I think that Lavage is an incredible organization in terms of treating our employees as trustworthy assets. And
Mhm.
so this is part of that trust is, the remote environment is about trust, that we have a flexible PTO policy. It's about trust. The impact program is about trust. And we're trusting that you are navigating your workday with whatever is best for you, and that you are giving back to the community. We want people that are focused on that. And so I think just having that trust culture is what
Hmm.
has really helped. It's not necessarily just impact or just the remote or just the other benefits, but having that two-way street of trust, I feel
Hmm.
like we've seen an increase in productivity. And
Mm.
again, we bill our time, we monitor time, I look at timesheets, I look at billable hours and that sort of thing. So I can absolutely tell what kind of impact this is having in the productivity and utilization numbers.
What about like job satisfaction? Do you all do any like annual surveys or anything like that? Is it
We do.
showing up there
Yeah.
too?
Yeah, and I've done impact surveys where I've said, what are your favorite organizations to volunteer for? How frequent do you want to do it? Is there a particular day of the week that's better for
Mm.
you? Morning, afternoon, because everybody's schedules are so different. So I have sent those surveys out. And then on everybody's annual performance review, we have some questions around impact and other in-person events just to get feedback for where they're at with those as well.
I love that. And I'm also curious, you had mentioned that your team is remote. How does this program help support your goals of, I don't know. I just find that when I have a hybrid team, and that's hard enough, and we come in the office a couple days a week,
Mhm.
that's hard enough to get people together and have them interact, get to know each other. That's
Mhm.
even harder when you're like largely remote. How has this program impacted, no pun intended, how has it contributed to your team members getting to know each other and hanging out and participating?
It's been awesome because you're in a remote environment. When you contact someone, you have a reason to contact them. You're asking for something, there's a task you're working on. It's a very, direct way of communicating. But so you only really talk to the people that you work with. You might not
Right.
talk to someone in accounting or someone,
Mhm. Sure,
in a
sure.
different department. So this is a way to pull people that you don't normally work with together and get to know them.
Hmm.
And I think our employees have enjoyed that. I think they
Hmm.
understand that from the beginning when they are brought on as a new hire, that is one of the things that we go over is this is a great way to get to know other people
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
organization. And they will find, we'll have like a crew with maybe one person in each department. And,
Yeah.
it might start out feeling kind of awkward, but at the end you're all working and, and it
Sure.
turns into something really fun. And so I do think, and then people leave feeling really good, even when we're volunteering at organizations that are hard to see, hard to watch
Yeah, heavy
with some of the
missions.
people are going through. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So I kind of have like two follow-up questions. What advice would you give a business owner that is contemplating a program like this? Like, what are some of your lessons learned? What advice would you give?
I would definitely say to get the feedback and interest level of employees. Ours was so great that it was easy to start because we knew the interest level was there. And then have that committee. We had a committee, we created a mission statement together, like I said, and kind of outlined where our passions were. And I thought that was really important to get it going. And then, like I said, give yourselves permission to do it. I mean, it seems simple, but sometimes people need to see that it's okay to step away from their desks and take part in something bigger.
Have you connected with this? Obviously seems like a personal passion of yours as well. And being the president or co-president, it's like, yes, I'm going to make this happen. I'm passionate about it. That is, I think, probably a key to the success of this program as well, the tone from the top and all of that. But for other people that either work for a company where they don't sit at that level and can make those executive decisions, or alternatively, if you have somebody at a leadership level where they just don't have the time to really champion that,
Mhm.
have you talked to other businesses that maybe have delegated that responsibility to someone else? And what does that role look like within an organization? If the president and CFO is not willing to champion that, what have you seen work, or have you seen other examples where that might work with a different position within a company? I'm just trying to think if someone's listening out there, like, yes, but I don't have time to do that. Who could I give that to? Like, what does that look like? Do you know in these
Yeah,
corporate programs?
I mean, I don't know specifically, but I would say anyone at any level can do it. But you have to
Mhm.
have leadership support. You don't have to have
Sure.
leadership doing it, but obviously they need to support it in order
Absolutely. Yeah.
for it to work. But I think anyone can express an interest and say, "Would you mind if I started this?"
Yeah.
And help get the resources in the work environment to make it work. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
think you definitely have to have leadership support.
Sure. So then I'm going to have to ask you, Sandra, how much time do you think you spend a week on this initiative? You personally.
Well, these days I don't spend a ton of time on it because we've been doing it for so long. Now I kind of know really well the organizations that are out there that need help.
Mhm.
I talk to a lot of them more regularly. I get requests now. It's not as
Okay.
much as I'm reaching out, but sometimes people are calling us.
Okay.
So I would say I spend, other than the volunteering itself, I
Sure.
probably spend 5 hours a month
On
on
the
it.
administration part of it. Okay. That's not
Yeah.
bad. That
And
was
it's just
gonna,
researching the charities, seeing, kind of learning about them and that kind of stuff.
yeah. And that was going to kind of dovetail into my next question. So you kind of already hinted on it. The nonprofit organizations, like I'm really kind of inspired by this conversation because it really brings me back to how can nonprofit organizations kind of identify who corporations could be that whether they have a full-fledged intentional program like this, or to your point, like reaching out to corporations and saying, hey, we have volunteer opportunities, this many people, like, would you be interested? What advice would you give to I guess nonprofit organizations and getting like tapped into corporations or pitching an idea like this? Or what advice would you give those volunteer coordinators at the nonprofits?
There are several websites that track volunteers. There's like Volunteer Hub. There's several of them
Okay.
where nonprofits can go on and say, "I need volunteers for this," and that's where I started. Is I started looking at those websites to see which organizations were requesting volunteers. So if
Okay.
I were a nonprofit and I needed volunteers, I would make sure that I was on those websites. And
Okay.
some of the bigger, I guess, more popular events we've gotten from those websites. But that's
Okay.
a good starting point, and that just making
Okay.
sure. And then a lot of nonprofits, do shout outs on LinkedIn and stuff like that, saying we love
Mhm.
volunteers, we have an event coming up, whatever it is.
Sure. So then you had mentioned sometimes they're recurring. Do you find yourself working with similar organizations, especially if they're very popular and well received by the team? Like, have you developed like long-term ongoing volunteer relationships with some of the organizations that you've worked with?
We have, I think the most popular one is the Potbelly Pig one in King Creek. Everybody loves the pigs, and I love them too. And it's a pig rescue, and they've got.
I feel like I've maybe talked to this nonprofit before because how many potbelly pig rescues are in the southwest part of the country? I wonder if I've talked to them before. I feel like I wonder if I know who this person is. Yes.
Yeah, and so they have, a sanctuary, and they've got almost
Yeah.
200 pigs, and they do big groups, so you can go out as
Yeah.
a big group, and that one is very well attended, and we make sure we do that one every year.
I mean, who doesn't want to just go check out? Like, I need to go check out this potbelly pig farm.
Well,
If not, if for no other reason, just sheer curiosity, right?
they're really cute, and they're really friendly, and you wouldn't really. They're really big, so you're
Yeah.
expecting, oh, it's going to be this tiny, cute little pig. They're pigs. And
Okay.
so when you go in, you can be a little bit overwhelmed by their size, but they're so friendly and they roll over and they're,
Mhm.
they're really, really sweet. And that's just one that people love.
Okay. I keep asking more questions because I'm curious about this. And admittedly, we've been trying to launch something similar like this with the charity CFO, and we have like the volunteer policy. So, those listening, I think if you are working with corporations, or maybe you are a corporation and you're trying to figure out ways to build volunteerism within your organization, I think step number one is getting buy-in from the leadership, because then the leadership has the authority to approve some sort of volunteer paid policy. And with that, I think it's really intentional for corporate leaders to be mindful, to allow this stuff to happen during work hours because it's tricky. I mean, I have a 10-year-old myself. It's tricky. There's all kinds of things that I have to do on the evenings and weekends. And so by filling our, nice to have corporate perks after hours doesn't feel so much like a perk anymore. And people have a lot of things going on in life outside of that. So I love the idea of creating a policy making during work hours. And admittedly, though, I found sometimes when I give perks, it's that employee engagement and that ongoing involvement. So I'm really curious, do you kind of review the hours actually input for volunteerism, and what percentage of your employees would you say actually participates in this on an annual basis? Or I'm curious how many hours are actually utilized. I'm a numbers person too, y'all. So
Yeah.
give me some grace here. But I'm kind of curious, like, what is the utilization of this benefit? Because sometimes we as leaders, we give benefits and some are well received and utilized and some aren't. And it's like, okay, how do we maximize this benefit that we're offering? So I'm just curious to hear from you because you've been doing this a while too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. I would say 80% of our employees participate.
Okay.
We have some out of state and out of city
Sure.
employees,
Makes
and
sense.
they'll even sometimes come in and
Okay.
participate, or we'll do a virtual event for our out of state employees. But I think it's been very well received. Now, are they participating every month? No,
Sure.
but almost everyone participates at least once a year. I don't
Mm,
think there are some people that go over the 16 hours and you're kind of like, okay. But
yeah.
most people don't. And
Okay.
so I feel like it's okay if there's a handful that are doing it and that are just extra passionate about it, as long as their work isn't falling, through the cracks. And I'm a mom too. I have a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, and there's just I feel like no way that I could do it on the
Right.
weekends either, or in the
Uh-huh.
evenings where you're almost creating a feeling of resentment, like you're being
Right.
forced
Forced
to do
to,
it rather
it's
than
an
and
obligation.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it takes away from what the purpose is.
So now I have to ask you the other, like, last awkward question. I keep saying the last question, but all these things keep coming through my mind. So what happens to those 20% of employees that don't participate in this program? Is that like a question of like, our values here at this company are as such, and we really value not just volunteerism, but team building and all of the things? Like, is that a requirement of the job to participate? Is that
Yeah,
where does like the encouragement benefit perk end and like, hey, are you a culture fit begin?
it is a fine line, because I do kind of look at it's not a mandate, but it's
Right,
strongly encouraged, and this is
right.
who we are.
It's a side
And we
eye, like if
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
like, yeah, that's
There's
who we are,
an
right.
expectation.
Hmm.
And so on the performance reviews, everybody gets an annual performance review. It will say how many impact events did you participate in, and it asks them, and then it asks their supervisor. So there's a little bit of, it's not really accountability necessarily, but it's in there so that it gets people thinking about it. And then all you can really do is just encourage, and
Sure.
promote the event and that kind of stuff, just to get people excited about it.
Well, I love this. You've given me a lot of inspiration to think about how we can maybe fast track some of our efforts here. And I know this is going to be helpful for other companies that are thinking the same thing. And I've loved just you kind of walking through the different steps and how you've really been able to systematize it. And this is me, the accounting junkie that's all about systems and processes, because, just in the day-to-day grind of work, I'm sure you all are no different. We find ourselves very, very busy with the ongoing work, and we only work with nonprofit organizations. So, in many ways, we do know that we're having some sort of impact in the communities because we're working with the nonprofits. But admittedly, it does become a little transactional at times. And I'm sure that's true with any job, even if you are working with missions that are kind of near and dear to you. But I really like your suggestion of having someone charged with actually formalizing the events. Admittedly, that's where we've fallen short, I think, because we say, hey guys, like coordinate these events and you have all these hours and go forth and conquer. And everybody, I think, would participate in the events if we put it on their calendar and also paid them to show up. But it's that barrier of I have to go seek out the events. I've got to, sign up for the events. I've got to do the things that just people are busy. They want to participate and volunteer. They just don't. And so I think that that's probably, if anyone out there is listening like me, it's certainly it's certainly something to think about. And I'm really curious too and I haven't thought about this before, and it's interesting for all of those that are working already for a nonprofit. How do you tap into corporations? And I think a lot of nonprofits are always looking how to get corporate support, whether it's
Mhm.
financially, donations, just PR, whatever it might be. I think this conversation is great for how to start cultivating those relationships with those that are in the corporate world. And even maybe explore, I never really thought of this until now. I mean, I used to work for a nonprofit, but just because you work for one nonprofit doesn't mean that's an exhaustive list of all your passions. And so, how can other individuals or nonprofits maybe even consider getting out into the community and volunteering in other ways? besides the mission that you're actually paid to do,
Right.
because many of us care about many things. So
Yes. And we do have, once in a while we do have nonprofits that want to be our only nonprofit. And that's great, but we really are firm in our, we're going to put,
approach. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, when you have 60 something employees, everybody
right.
loves something differently. Same for me. I have about 55 employees and we all can pretty much agree on a lot of things, but we all have our favorites.
And
So,
it's personal. This is it's a
very
personal.
personal.
Yeah.
We should
Yeah.
embrace that.
Yeah.
Well, Sandra, this has been incredible. If somebody wanted to just kind of sleuth along and follow, I don't know if you put any of these activities out on social media or if you share anything about your impact program. If that's the case, how would people follow along with this and see how your company is really living into this, corporate value of volunteerism and giving back?
Yeah, you can find us on our website, lavage.com. There's light bulb moments, and most of them include, some impact event.
Okay, love
I'm
that.
also on LinkedIn, and I promote the events on there as well.
Awesome. Well, we've already connected on LinkedIn, so I'll definitely be checking you out and getting inspiration for myself. I think this is such a great conversation for corporations out there to be thinking about how to get their teams involved. People want this. Honestly, now more than ever, they probably need it.
Right.
They
I know
need something positive to look forward to.
yeah.
So thank you for, being willing to take some time out of your day and share how your company. And kudos to you for being a leader that supports volunteerism, giving back, and also honoring people having lives beyond, the 8 to 5. And we got to show up for our families too. So kudos to you for being a leader to help champion activities like this during the workday that sometimes seems like, oh, we're losing productivity, but it's like, we're going to gain so much more in the long run. And it really shows for your employees. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you, Tasha.
Well, everybody, that's a wrap for this episode. You know what I do? My shameless plug for engaging with this content in some way. If you are somebody that found value in this conversation, make sure to share, like, and promote it in any way you can. It just helps the meta world know that we exist and other nonprofit leaders can find us. And if you found this episode especially helpful, hey, don't be afraid to share this with one of your corporate friends and say, hey, if you've been thinking about getting a volunteer program going, this might inspire them to do that. This has been a fun episode, Sandra. Thank you all so much. And for those listening, I'll see you next time.